All right, welcome back. Here we are, the fourth video in Module 10. Now, in this video, this is not something that I'm necessarily going to have you do as a requirement in a graded notebook, but it might be in as a bonus point option kind of thing. All right. So you'll likely see those modules, the built-ins, or some things from the libraries that we talked about in the last video. You should see some of those concepts in this fourth graded notebook. So here we are, the fourth video for Module 10. And at the start of this module, I alluded to the fact that, we're going to change how we lay out our code. And why would we do that? Well, it really all has to do with what this module is all about. And this module is about modules and libraries and packages. And we think about modules and libraries and packages. What are they? Well, they're files or groups of files to essentially outsource our work to. So my program that I create, the equivalent of what I put in these code blocks up here, this is the little program that I wrote, but I didn't put a .py file name to it. I did this in this little program that I'm dealing with called Jupyter Notebooks. Well, if I was doing everything in .py files, I would do this in my own .py file. Now, wait a minute. .py files that we were just looking at, those are modules. And those modules may not be what I want to say is foundational programming. They may just be some worker that performs some task or does something. They're not where this is all going to be executed from. That's not what's going to be run by the system. It's not where everything's going to initiate from. But when we put a main method, in there like this, the main method is where everything else gets called from or invoked from. This is where our work gets called. Now this one just calls the print method, which is a method that's built into the Python library. It calls it, passes it some argument, and it does work for me. Now, in some languages, by default, when it sees the main, it just goes and runs the main. Now, I want to put this little bit of code in here. And essentially what this says is, I'm defining the main just like any other function or method. So this, when I mouse over it, it tells me, hey, this is a function called main. Is it returning any values? Nope. It's just calling a function or calling a method and performing a task. This next line of code here says, if name is equivalent to main, then run main. So essentially, it says, go look and see if there's a main method in here. And if there is the same as this, all right, run it. Call that method. If you got a main in there, let's do it. That's all that does. Now, if that wasn't there, there was no method, no main method there. Wait a minute. It says enter a smaller number. It went back and looked for the last time it found a main. Man, I don't want it to go back and look for some main from way back. Now, hang on a second. Sorry about that. I accidentally deleted that cell and had to go recreate it. So rather than you watching me do it, I just paused the video. So when it comes to how we're executing our Python code, we're essentially calling it by name, but I can do it from a command line, or I can do it from like this here, which we've been doing. Now, if we do it from a command line, I would execute something like this from some Python script, and this will go run. I say I'm going to run this execution methods.py from a command line, and then it goes and does its thing. Whatever's in that execution methods.py, it goes and does it for me. And essentially what that did was it printed out something that said, this is my file to test Python's execution methods. The variable name tells me whatever, and the value of the name is main. So this walks you through what was taking place in there, and that's from a command line. So we can run these things from a command line, either from an IDE in, say, Python running on our local machine, or I can run it from a literal command line, a DOS command prompt kind of thing. Or we can keep doing it the way that we've been doing it up to this point, to use this user-friendly IDE, and in it I define my main, and if there's something here called main, let's call it. Check to see if there is a main. If there is, call it. Well, you know, if everything had a main in it, check to see if the main's there, let's go do it. Now, if I invoke this Python file that I had this code in, it would go look to see if there was a main. If there was a main, it would run it. Just by calling that .py file. It goes in, looks for this, and then runs it. Now, other languages, they can automatically go seek out the main and execute it. With this one, we've got a test, a logical test in here to check to see if it exists, and if it doesn't, don't do anything. Not all .py files are created the same. A lot of them just have functions in them, and they're not built to run on their own. They're just functionality built into some package. Here, I've got this package that has this functionality available to you. We can do that. So we can run these things from a command line, or we can do it from what we call an interactive interpreter, like what we've been doing, and go do our code the way we want to do it. Now, here's an example where we import from time. Let's import sleep. And if we come down, let's look to see, where do we have anything relative to sleep? See anything in there? Oh, there's a sleep method. So it says right here, sleep 3. Beginning data processing, modified data. So what's taking place in here? If I ran this, what's going to happen is it's going to first import sleep from time. it's going to print this out. Then it's going to go through and evaluate these as functions. It's going to see each one of them and identify them as functions. And then it hits here and it says, oh, if there's a main, run that main. So let's execute this and see what it actually does. This is my file to demonstrate best practices. That was that first line of code that got run. Reading data from the web. Beginning data processing. Ooh, look at here. So we went into the main, read data from the web. Process data. We're going step by step, right on through it. And as we're going through it, we see the work getting done. And then it was all done. This is data from the web that has been modified. So whatever was taking place, it did its thing. It used some external module and a method that's built into it. And if I want to find out what is this sleep method, let me I can go search the internet. It's a Python time module sleep. Boom. And there it is. It'll tell me about it. And anything I might want to know about it. So we executed this code. I said, let's go run it. Now, what if there was no main? Better yet, let me call this something else. Let's call it Jeff. I run it. So wait a minute. What did it just do? Remember what it did? All right. This is why I want to go through and do these things the way we're doing them. Now, I'm on a runtime in Colab. And essentially what that means is I'm connected to the processor and I'm doing my thing using that processor. And it's an active connection. Even though I paused, it still remembers, because I look over here, it's still an active connection. So when I ran it before, and this was called main, it remembered what was there. I would have to come up top, tools, and I would have to, not tools, but runtime, and I would have to disconnect and delete runtime or restart and run all. Restart runtime to clear that memory of the main. Why is that a big deal? It remembers what main was from before. It remembers it. Once I've imported something, it remembers it. In this runtime that we're running on now, this, even though I just ran this, the whole thing's still running. The whole notebook is actively running, even though I don't necessarily see it as running. But every time I execute this, it adds something into the runtime that I've got going on. So when I come back, I say main, and change what main is. So print help. We see what was printed here. This reading, beginning, data. This reading, beginning, and data. This help reading, beginning, data. So now it doesn't have to remember the old main. It remembers the new main that I've just created in there. If I said, hey, what's Jeff? Run Jeff. would happen if I came down here and said, hey, if there's a main, run Jeff. Will it let me do that? Yeah, it did. It did. It let me run it because it remembered that Jeff was a copy of the main. So this is, in a way, why we're being more efficient about what we're doing and why we're focused on the efficiency of the processes, how this thing all works and what the runtime is using, how much resources are being tied up. Does it remember things in this kind of format? If I ran this in a command line, yeah, it's different. You run it in the command line, it executes, and then it's done. This is still sitting there running as long as I have an active runtime. And I can come over here and I can see as far as my runtime and whatnot. How much RAM am I using, this space? And see, it's telling me there are different aspects of my runtime. And I can come over here, view runtime logs, change my runtime type. And my runtime is associated with the CPU. I've got a connection to the CPU using processes in the CPU. But in my runtime, using Google Colabs, I'm actually using a GPU. I've got a subscription with Colab to where mine's not free because I've got more than what you guys are using, because I use it far more and with huge amounts of data. And I use a GPU rather than a CPU so that I have more processing power than just the CPU. So those are some add-ons to what we've been dealing with so far relative to how we set our code up. So you may see something in the notebook. For bonus points, go set it up with a main method and call everything from your main and do a conditional to see if a main exists. And if it does, call that main. By that means use this form. Okay. So I'll see you in the next module.